But finally, you talk about drugs. You know, I remember 2002 I was talking about cannabis, and nobody was listening. Cannabis, like alcohol, is a gateway drug to cocaine, and we had this lovely feeling about it. Sure, it's a bit of fun. We are now in an epidemic, and we have to deal with it. And public officials and people in RTE are snorting cocaine all over the place. And yes, and they are talking. Yes. And they are talking, let's be honest, and they are talking, but they are talking about everybody who is taking cocaine is adding to the crime problem, is funding that serious issue of crime gangs, and we can't have it both ways.
Yeah, I don't think you should be singling out any one organisation or
company.
No,
but it's quite obvious. It's quite obvious, and I know all over this country. There's people talking, every man, woman and child that's talking about crime and that's taking cocaine and illegal drugs are helping to fund that crime, are helping to start off those gangs, and we have to get real about it.
Okay, all right, James Conway, you wanted to...
Yeah, I think fundamentally what that lady is suffering from is disillusionment, and that's quite understandable. We've had a closure of rural Garda stations. We had a Fine Gael leader the other night who says they need to be closed because now we have cars and mobile phones. I would argue there are parts of Sligo where you have no mobile phone signal to fight crime. Now, rural patrols have gone down hugely. When I was a younger man, it was quite regular to see the guards from Killarney Station or that driving by our farm, which made us feel comfortable at home that there was a presence there. Now, on the drugs issue, I went to my first disco when I was 14. I'm 26 now. There was drugs there. There was cocaine. There was ecstasy. An awful lot of parents are in total denial of the availability, and that was in rural Ireland. That was in Sligo. Now, thankfully enough, I was in a position that both my parents had warned me of the dangers of it. But we really have to get behind tackling this. And the only way we're going to tackle it is by keeping and retaining the stations we have, opening ones that have been closed down, having a stronger Garda presence, and community policing, where guards get present with younger people. They go into the schools, they tell them of the dangers of it, and they're there regularly talking to the younger people, showing them the dangers. Because I don't think a lot of younger people are aware of what they are sponsoring, which is absolute vicious criminality behind it all.
We only have to look during the course of this particular election campaign. We've had
that young man in
Dublin.
We've
had murders, we've had stabbings, we've had bodies dismembered and so forth. And your comments on this?
I agree with everything that this gentleman has said, absolutely every word. I've worked all my life in community health. I worked as a GP, and certainly, you know, it is incredible the availability. I ask young people, what are you taking? And the answer is generally everything, and everything is available. And this is coming into the country illegally. This is not prescription medication. Only a very, very small amount of it is. And surely in this day and age, we need to put our resources, we need to stop the stream upstream, not be dealing with the casualties downstream. The second thing I'd like to say is that we need, in cities and in rural areas, designated detoxification and treatment centres with community psychiatric follow-up for people suffering addiction.
Okay, we're at that stage.
And prevention, the most important thing, and it has been mentioned here and requires to be mentioned, is where young people have no self-esteem, where they do not feel that they have a place in this world, where they do not have a prospect of a home and a decent education, then, you know, that's not where the finger needs to be pointed.
Okay.
Rural guards.
Okay.
We need people who know their communities, policing their communities.
Martin Kenny?
Just briefly to say, what we feel needs to happen is we need to recruit more Gardaí, we need to have record numbers of Gardaí, we need to civilionise...
16,000, I think.
16,000. And we need to civilionise more of the part of it that's behind the desk and get the Gardaí out in the community. There's also, and you know, people have said earlier on here, you know, that they used to know their local Garda. A lot of people don't know their local Garda anymore. And I think that's one of the key things that we had in the past. But apart from the crime and all of that side of it, there's the other side of it, which is about the healthcare side of it and the community side of it, which has a huge impact. And I think, I know I was talking to a cousin of mine from Australia recently. He was saying that in workplaces there, they can walk in, the equivalent of the health authority will walk into any workplace and say, we're randomly testing 20 people here this morning. And if they fail, they have to go home and come back and put onto a drug detoxification program in order to keep their jobs. I think we need to move into something like that in order to resolve this problem, because people who take drugs are taking an illegal drug which is imported into the country by gangs who are very, very dangerous and who are absolutely destroying communities. Okay. And we have to have a response to that, which is more than just a law and order response. It also has to be a community response, a workplace response.
Sinn Féin are talking about establishing a sentencing council. What is that exactly, do you know?
Sentencing council is to ensure that there is a proper a proper level of sentencing, that in one case you will have perhaps in one judge in Kerry can give one sentence and a judge in Dundalk will give a different one, and a judge in Sligo will give a different one for the same crime.
So
we need to have uniformity and consistency across the country.
Declan Bree and Shane Ellis, you want to comment on
Niall, it is an
issue?
issue, but I have to say it hasn't come up so often on the doors during the canvass, but it's an issue that would come up regularly over the last number of years in my clinics. And
this is crime we're talking about,
yes, crime, and particularly the issue of drugs. Because when we talk about drugs, a lot of people think about the guy and will come in and say, what's his name is selling drugs at the corner of whatever street every Saturday evening, Declan, will you contact the guards about such and such? And it's not about the guy selling the drugs at the corner. We've got to realise that this is a multi-million euro business. It's big business, and unless the state and unless the government provide the necessary resources for the guards, it's impossible for them to deal with the issue. And I speak to guards regularly. I know the pressure they're under. They are doing their best under very difficult circumstances, but they're the first people that will tell any of us that they need additional resources to fight this.
Shane Ellis.
Yeah, I think it's a big problem now when you turn around and you see young people and they're budgeting for their debs for buying cocaine. I think it's an epidemic. It's absolutely every place. Every small little village, every small town, it's every place. It can be got in 15 minutes. I think what everyone is saying here is right. Education is the way to go. I think it's shock education. Bring in former addicts into the schools. Let them tell the people how they robbed from their families, how they stole from their families, stole from their neighbours. I think mandatory testing is the way forward, because I think it's the middle classes that are using it an awful lot. I agree with what James was saying there. Okay. But I think the psychotic incidents happening and stabbings around every house, town, every place. Okay. Around the countryside, and it's all leading to drugs. It's all fueled by drugs.
We'll bring in a few more on this, and we move on to another question. Blahin.
Well, we need to look at the root problem, the root cause of the drug problem, and it's investment in our social support system. We do not invest in our social support system. In fact, they're the first things to be cut during austerity. And we also need to look at the abuse of the biggest drug in this country, and that's alcohol. We don't bring that in, and that is a gateway drug more than anything else. We need to look at the drug issue as not a criminal issue, but rather a health issue. And if we do that, I'm not talking about decriminalising the drug gangs, but we need to make it a health issue where people who are taking drugs are not sent into the prison system, but rather they're sent for health support.
Okay, two more quick points. Marion and James, as they sounded. Marion.
The drugs task forces, they need to be resourced because they coordinate all the local services, and that gives a proper community response. And just a point about random drug testing. Perhaps if we want to show good example, the first place we might start is Leinster House.
Correct. All right, so did you say that for a reason or not? It's just
Absolutely
to
not.
Just to show example. Okay.
But it's a good example.
Okay. James and Mark, and we'll move on to another question.
Yeah, I think with respect to the Gardaí, they're facing a situation now with pay and resources, and that in years gone past, there wasn't the same degree of violence and criminality as the modern day drug dealer has brought to it. And we need to address that, because we have a situation where young men and women who are quite easily led in towns, they see drug dealers going around in X5s and Range Rovers, and they see the guard going round in a Ford Focus and finding it hard to pay his rent.
Okay.
We need to make the Gardaí able to receive a wage
Mark,
which is good.
Quick comment from you. We move on to another question.
Yeah, just very quick clarification. First of all, I mean, obviously I'm well aware, I mean, drugs are in every single townland and village in the country, but the point I'm making is it is better healed people nationally without social problems as such that are fueling this from a financial perspective. Now, in government, what we will do is establish a rural crime bureau similar to CAB, a specialist unit to focus specifically on rural crime, which is back to the safety question.
That sounds like a vote of no confidence in the Gardaí when you have to set up a specific.
No, absolutely
rural crime
not.
unit.
It's absolutely not. It's about providing them, and indeed, as all the speakers have said, with the necessary resources they require.
All right. Okay.